The dusty town of Dry Creek was dressed in its Sunday best that afternoon. The church bells rang loud, echoing across the open plains as curious townsfolk gathered in the square. The occasion was something the whole town had been waiting for, the bride auction. Women stood behind the wooden platform, their faces shadowed by bonnets and tears, while men lined up with pockets full of coins and hearts full of pride. It wasn't about love anymore, it was survival. Among them stood Evelyn Grace, a woman of nearly 40. Her once golden hair now touched with silver. Her hands calloused from years of labor. Her eyes, deep as twilight, carried the quiet dignity of a woman who had seen more winters than she wished to count. She wasn't beautiful in the way the young girls were. Her youth had faded, her skin bore the marks of time. And her smile was cautious, as though she feared hope itself. She had come to Dry Creek with nothing left to lose, no family, no land, no husband. The auctioneer, a loud man with a cigar hanging between his teeth, shouted the bids for the younger women. $30. $40. $50. Men competed, laughter filled the air, and brides were claimed one by one. But when Evelyn's name was called, a strange silence fell. Next, the auctioneer barked. Evelyn Grace, age 38. From Willow Hollow. Strong worker, good cook, and, he paused, flipping through a crumpled note, widowed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. No one raised a hand. The laughter from earlier now felt cruel in its absence. Evelyn's eyes darted toward the horizon, maybe someone, anyone, would step forward. But all she saw were the looks of pity from women and the mocking smirks from men. She's too old. No one wants a used-up widow. She should be minding someone's children, not marrying again. Every word sliced her open. She had lost everything once, her husband to fever, her home to debt, and her pride to gossip. She'd hoped today might be a new start. But now she stood like a ghost in plain sight, invisible to everyone who looked her way. The auctioneer coughed, awkwardly. No bids. All right, moving on. But then, from the edge of the crowd, came a small voice. Clear, innocent, and trembling. That's her. Heads turned. A little girl, no older than 6, stood clutching a ragged doll in one arm and pointing with the other. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled, and her eyes, oh. Her eyes shone with desperate hope. That's my mama. The crowd gasped. Whispers rippled through them like wildfire. The auctioneer blinked. Whose child is that? No one answered. The little girl ran through the crowd, stumbling in her small shoes, until she reached the stage. She wrapped her arms around Evelyn's legs and sobbed. Please don't leave me again, Mama. I found you. Evelyn froze. Her heart twisted as if time had reversed itself. Sweetheart, she whispered, kneeling down. I think you've made a mistake. But before she could finish, a tall man stepped forward from the edge of the square. His coat was worn, his boots covered in trail dust. And his eyes, gray and kind, locked onto Evelyn and the child. I believe the girl's tellin' the truth, he said, his voice deep and steady. That's her mama. The crowd parted as he walked forward. The child ran to him and tugged his hand. Papa, tell them. Tell them she's my mama. Gasps spread again, whispers, rumors, disbelief. The man removed his hat. Name's Caleb Morgan. My wife passed 3 years ago. This little one's been prayin' every night for a mama again. We came here today hopin' to find someone kind. Someone good. His gaze softened. Seems she's already made her choice. Evelyn stared at him, confusion and shock flooding her chest. Sir, I don't even know. He cut her off gently. You don't have to. Sometimes, the good Lord does the choosing for us. The crowd, moments ago cruel and mocking, now watched in stunned silence. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Well, if the man's willing to claim her, then, sold. He slammed his gavel. To Mr. Caleb Morgan. Cheers rose from a few onlookers, though most simply gawked. Evelyn stood trembling, unsure whether to weep or smile. The little girl, Lily, clung to her hand as if she'd found her whole world again. Caleb offered his arm, a gesture of both respect and reassurance. "Come on, Miss Evelyn. Let's get you home." The journey to the Morgan Ranch was quiet. The golden fields stretched wide, and the scent of sagebrush floated on the wind. Evelyn rode in the wagon beside Caleb while Lily sat between them, humming softly. Her small hands clutching Evelyn's sleeve as though afraid she'd vanish. When they reached the ranch, Evelyn couldn't help but stare. It wasn't grand, but it was alive. Horses grazed nearby, chickens darted around the coop, and the sound of a windmill creaking echoed through the stillness. "This place," she whispered. "It feels peaceful." Caleb nodded. "It's been empty a long while. We need someone who can bring life back to it." That night, after supper, Evelyn tucked Lily into bed. The child's small hand found hers. "Mama, will you stay forever?" Her throat tightened. "We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see." But deep inside, Evelyn felt something stir, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn worked hard, tending to the kitchen, feeding the animals, and planting flowers outside the porch. Lily followed her everywhere, calling her Mama without hesitation. Caleb worked long hours, but every night he'd sit quietly at the table, listening to Evelyn's stories or watching Lily fall asleep in her lap. The town whispered, of course. He married her out of pity. An old widow can't give him an heir. But Evelyn didn't care anymore. The laughter of a child, and the quiet strength of a man who never looked at her with judgment. That was more than she ever dreamed of. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains. Thunder boomed, and the wind howled through the cracks of the house. Lily woke up crying. Evelyn ran to her room, wrapping her in a blanket and whispering softly until she calmed. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching silently. When the storm passed, he said, "You're more of a mother than half the women I've known. And I reckon, more of a woman than any I could have hoped for." Evelyn turned, tears shining in her eyes. "I never thought anyone would see me again. Not like this." Caleb smiled gently. "You were never invisible, Evelyn. You were just waiting for the right hearts to notice." She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it touched his arm. "And you? Why did you step forward that day?" He looked at her, then at Lily sleeping peacefully. "Because when that little girl said, 'That's my mama,' I realized. She wasn't just talking about herself. She was speaking for me too." The silence between them filled with warmth, unspoken understanding, unforced love. Two souls broken by time, mended by chance. Months later, the townsfolk gathered again, not for an auction, but a wedding. The same square that once mocked her now bloomed with flowers. Evelyn stood in a simple dress, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. Caleb held her hand, pride and peace glowing in his eyes. Lily danced around them, tossing petals and shouting, "Mama's getting married." When the preacher asked, "Do you take this man?" Evelyn smiled through her tears. "With all my heart." And when Caleb said, "Do you take this woman?" he looked at Lily before answering, "With all of ours." The crowd erupted in applause, and this time, no one laughed. Evelyn had come to that town a forgotten woman. But she left the altar a wife, a mother, and a reminder that love doesn't come late, only right on time.